Welcome to On Our Watch, a podcast about coastal erosion and sustainability in Louisiana, as well as the implications for coastal systems worldwide. My name is Marian Evans. I'm a filmmaker and a producer of the documentary On Our Watch, a feature-length film about Louisiana's coastal land loss crisis. The film's director, Jonathan Evans, and I are proud to produce this podcast series that will continue to explore important coastal issues through conversations with local residents, community leaders, and experts. In this episode, we're speaking with Dana Honn. Dana is the executive chef and owner of Carmo, a New Orleans-based tropical café with an emphasis on fresh, local ingredients and sustainability. Dana is also a longtime advocate for environmental conservation. And now, our interview with Dana Honn. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dana. So, as a chef, it seems like you've always had a strong commitment to sustainability in the way you run your restaurants and the way you source your ingredients. So where did that interest in sustainability and the environment start for you?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. Carmo's been here for about 14 years now. Before that, my wife Christina and I did catering. We had a catering business and worked a lot with community organizations, and so we were always, we're always meeting, producers, and that became, part of what we decided was, an essential part of what we wanted to do. Before this, we lived in San Francisco and we did catering there, and actually, Christina was a produce manager at one of the oldest co-ops in San Francisco, well, the oldest co-op in San Francisco, Other Avenues. And so consequently, we got really spoiled with our produce. And so, of course, that's what we looked for when we came down here. And you just can't find that at the grocery store. So we like to serve what we like to eat. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where it started.
And so what do you think is unique about this particular region of South Louisiana in terms of the cuisine and the local ingredients that are available?
Yeah, I mean, we're very, very lucky. I think that there are a few places in the world we could start with the bounty of seafood that we have. That really is a number of different reasons that we have the amount of productivity of our coastal ecosystems as we do, but obviously we have large freshwater bodies flowing into saltwater bodies, and lots of nutrients flowing out. So these estuaries are the perfect nurseries for a number of species. And of course, we have fresh brackish, several levels of brackish, flowing into salt water, and that going, many, many miles offshore. So we have different fisheries in terms of geographical regions of the coast. We have different fishing traditions that have been here for a long, long time too, going back 300 years really. And as far as I can tell, I've identified about 8 main historic fishing community cultures that have come in from, everything, of course, the indigenous communities that were here first, the African American fishers, the Croatian, there were Sicilians, there were Filipino, there were Chinese, there were Vietnamese, and others that have been part of building our fishing cultures around the region, not just in Louisiana, but really the Gulf South. So you have a history, you have a natural, kind of palette that's very, very rich. And then you have these traditions that have evolved, and these traditions, we call them, Cajun, or we call them Creole, or we call them, some other label that is derived from one of those or something else. So we have a lot of rich history and culture to draw upon. And then in terms of plant life, we're subtropical. becoming tropical if we're not already. And over a long period of time, people brought things here. There were already many native species that were edible, and people who moved here from the very beginning made use of those edible plants. Some of them were related to plants that they knew from where they came from. So you have the development of native species, you have people bringing species from wherever they came from and sowing them and developing them so that they worked in Louisiana. I can think of an example, back in the 30s, there was, late 20s, 30s, there was a avocado that was developed called the Burris avocado. And it was one that was developed from, obviously tropical varieties so that it would work here. And there are many other examples of fruits and vegetables that were brought from other places and adapted to our climate here. So I don't know. I think that it's a number of different things that comes together to make our fisheries and our cornucopia of different vegetables and plants kind of as prolific as it is.
Going back to what you were saying about sourcing your ingredients and what you were used to in San Francisco, how you wanted to replicate that here, how do you go about finding those, the quality of ingredients that you prefer? Like, you have to develop relationships with certain farmers and
actually I think that's the operative word. When people talk about sustainability, and it's a word that gets used a lot and misused a lot, and you find it greenwash, used in greenwashing all the time. But if it is anything, it is relationships, and it's building those relationships that is the most essential part of being able to maintain, the utilization of good, clean, and fair. Which is I use sometimes because it's a quick way to say, things that are produced in a clean way, in an equitable way, in a flavorful way, so that everybody has access to good food, which everybody deserves. So these relationships are something that it requires two sides of commitment, and that a lot of times I think is also the barrier to people entering into this space where they can source directly from farmers or from fishers, is that in order to get started, you can't just say, hey, I need some lettuce and I need 5 pounds, every 3 days, and bring it to me.
Yeah.
You have to make the commitment to the producer where their needs are being addressed on the same level that your needs are being addressed. Without that dual commitment, you don't have the kind of partnership that you need to move forward. And I think that here specifically, that was, it's preaching to the choir in San Francisco and Northern California. Down here, the people who have been engaged in growing things for themselves and for others have know their stuff. They have to know their stuff because it's not easy, and these are folks who really have put a lot of time and effort to make something sustainable for themselves. And so again, you just have to mirror that commitment in terms of, when, I can think of a couple of instances where, like in the beginning, we worked with Veggie Farmers Co-op. Wonderful, we love them, and we've worked with them now for well over 10 years. But, there was this beginning, this time where they had more than we needed, and then very quickly we needed more than they had. And so it was constantly like this adjusting, and it's that kind of thing that I think you have to enter into together.
Yeah, you have to, like, your needs have to line up with their needs.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. So I know that you've been a longtime advocate of ocean and coastal conservation, both here in Louisiana and around the world. So why is that particular issue so important to you?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of different levels of, I think, that, why it impacts everybody, and certainly restaurants are part of that. But just on a personal level, I feel like without healthy, productive, coastal cultures, or communities and ecosystems, what we have here doesn't exist. I really feel like it's that important. Without our connection to what happens there, New Orleans certainly would be nothing of what it is now or has been. So there's that, and there again, you can talk about history and culture, and get down to a scientific level of why that would affect us. But just in terms of what we do here at Carmo, and why we engage with coastal communities and consider them our partners on a daily basis, is because for the relationships that we talked about, because we want to know our fishers, we want to know where that bounty comes from, but also we want to provide opportunities. We want to be a place that not only, hopefully, I mean ideally, isn't creating a bigger footprint in a negative sense than what we're actually giving back, but maybe we can take it beyond that and actually give back more than we're taking. And so the idea is that it's possible, even in having a for-profit business, not that we've ever been profitable, but we've always, we break even, mm-hmm. Which is about as good as I think that maybe we can do. But through that process, if we can develop relationships and figure out ways to be a part of the solution.
Right. We want to make sure those fishermen and those communities can sustain themselves,
yeah.
so that you guys can work together.
Exactly, yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the future of the seafood industry in Louisiana as it relates to the Mid-Barataria Sediment Diversion Project? And how do you feel about that project going forward?
Well, I mean, I have mixed feelings about actually most coastal restoration projects, and I think that that's probably normal because a lot of this stuff hasn't been done before. Mm-hmm. So there are going to be things that are successful and not successful, or different levels of success or failure. But I think there are two things. One thing that's true is if nothing is done, things are going to change. Mm-hmm. And things are going to change. It might be 5 or 10 years off before we see massive change, but nature is changing. On the other hand, if we do something, things are going to change. Things are going to change more quickly, but ultimately, if they were done right, which there's a lot of questions about, but if they were done right, then we would have more control over that change. So that's my general assessment of these diversion projects, which is, things are essential, but we have to make sure that what we're doing is actually working. And I think that requires a flexible approach. But aside from all of that, the number one thing is those people who are part of those areas that are affected they are number one. They have to be made right. There's billions of dollars that's flowing into these projects. And if anybody deserves a piece of that, it's the people who are affected first. In terms of my, the way that I feel about the seafood industry in general moving forward, I'm alarmed. I'm very, very alarmed. And, I think that all we have to do is look at, for example, I had on Monday, one of our fishers bring up about 300 pounds of sheep's head for us. And they're also shrimpers. And I was talking to one of them, and they were saying that right now all the docks, or all the boats are at the marina. They're not going out even. It's not worth it for them. We have a parked shrimp industry right now. People don't realize what that means or how historic that is. It's never been this bad. It's to the point that people are literally killing themselves. And I've heard of multiple stories of this over just the last 6 months. So if people don't get the message that everything that we're taking for granted is going to dissolve very quickly, if they don't get that message quickly, then we're all going to be in the same boat, which is sinking. And so that's my most dire feeling. Aside from that, in terms of the fisheries themselves and the potential for us to get this right and to do right by the fishers, I think that the fisheries themselves have a good deal of, I think we should have a lot of hope in terms of the potential health and productivity of those fisheries. I think that for the most part, like the shrimpers, for example, aren't seeing drastic reductions in their catch. Mm-hmm. That's not the problem. The problem is that we're consuming 90% of the, millions of tons of shrimp that we consume nationally is being imported, And even here in the state, people are going out, or in the city, people are going out for po' boys made with imported shrimp and catfish and crawfish. And, if we don't get a handle on this, this system that we have where we're bringing inferior, sometimes toxic product in, and compared to, we have affordable shrimp in Louisiana. The dock prices are stupid low to the point that shrimpers can't even afford it, but still people are going out and purchasing, this inferior, product. But aside from that, we are all in a state of adaptation because of climate change. And, the thing that we have to be ready for is what are we going to be eating, when this species or that species is not available or not as available, So adaptive fisheries management is like the new paradigm of, fisheries management. And that's happening everywhere, but we are ground zero for adaptive fisheries management. And we're doing it not because we want to, but because we have to.
So moving beyond Louisiana, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your Origins Amazonia project, and how did your fascination with the Amazon come about?
Well, the first, I've always, since I was little, I've always been kind of infatuated with the tropics and tropical forests and all of this. And so at the point that I moved to Brazil, this was back in the 90s, I was like, I had to get to Amazonia. And I was able to get there fairly quickly after I moved to Brazil. The moment that I stepped foot in the rainforest, I was like, yeah, this was everything that I thought it could be or should be, and way more. And the one thing that I always feel, not always feel, but sometimes feel in nature that is an amazing experience, which I always look to experience again, is kind of this visceral connection with what's around you, and to the point that you can feel the energy, you can every sense you have, from your smell to your sight and even taste, is connected to where you are. I felt that immediately in the Amazon. So there was already kind of a nascent, infatuation with that. And then over the years, Carmo was always supposed to be about telling, like, kind of food with a story, telling this narrative of, pretty much, tropical food, because about 90% of what's on the world's plate originates in the tropics. We don't normally think of it that way, but even what people are eating in Alaska, a lot of it originated in the tropics. So at the same time, most of what we face as a planet faces the tropics first, whether you're talking about climate change, whether you're talking about pollution, whether you're talking about income inequity, just a whole list of things, really hits the tropics first. And consequently, a lot of the, what I call origins of our food are threatened. Because in those places, there still exist some of the ancestral varieties of plants and even some of the wild ancestors to those cultivars. The more that I thought about the Amazon, for some reason about 5 years ago, it got back in my head, the Amazon. I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I read like every book I could get my hands on, watched every documentary, and I started making contact with people in conservation organizations and people who live and work down there, and it just became more a part of my daily life. And at a certain point I realized, wait a second, this is the narrative. Because a lot of those foods that we're talking about that's on the world's plate come from South America, Central America, and most of those have their origins in the Amazon. So whether you're talking about, even like things like tomatoes, there were ancient wild varieties of tomatoes in the Amazonian highlands, and on the Peruvian side there were obviously potatoes. There were wild potatoes in the Amazon, and sweet potatoes specifically from the Amazon, yuca, all peppers. There were no peppers, in China or Africa before people took them from South America to those places. And, the list really just goes on, and I realized it's like, okay, well, there's something more here. Maybe we should invest some more time in understanding just how we might be able to make these connections. And so we started going down and making, forging some direct relationships specifically with some indigenous communities. And we got lucky on one of those trips and made some connections with some folks in the Xingu region of the Amazon. It's sometimes hard to get hard for me to get my head around how massive of an area we're talking about. But, you can take a map of the United States and drop it within the Amazon. Yeah. If you take, I think, something like the Amazon and 6 largest tributaries all make the top 10 rivers on Earth. So this is on a scale. You can be in parts of the Amazon River and not see either side. But we went down there not with the idea of, we're going to do, this Amazonian food thing. We really just went down with a great group of people. We've since put together kind of an organization, and so it's been a really valuable relationship that we've developed, and we have lots of plans for the future. In fact, we'll be going back down this year, and we're all working on, we have several projects. One of the main projects is Beling, which is at the mouth of the Amazon, is going to be the host of COP30, the global climate conference. And so that's 2025. And so we are doing a number of projects centering around food waste. Okay. And we will be present at the conference and really just helping in whatever way we can to facilitate the indigenous groups in their efforts to replant, literally and figuratively, their ancestral varieties and their culture in their region.
That's all very exciting.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, Dana.
No, thank you. No, thanks for the opportunity to jab.
Yeah, I really appreciate it.
Gab.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to On Our Watch. We hope you enjoyed our discussion with Dana Honn. Don't forget to subscribe to On Our Watch on your favorite podcast app to be notified about future episodes. You can find our feature-length documentary On Our Watch, as well as a video version of today's episode, in the links below. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back with another episode next week. This podcast is made possible through support from the Greater New Orleans Foundation and executive produced by Bruno UK Steiner.